Most men don't walk away because they stop loving her. They walk away because, after being tested over and over again, something inside them quietly shifts. If you've ever wondered why a guy can go from fighting tooth and nail for a relationship to just leaving and never looking back, this video is going to break down the psychological shift that almost nobody sees coming. Topic 1. The tests start small, almost impossible to notice. When a relationship is just getting started, almost nobody imagines it could slowly be worn down by something as subtle as little emotional tests. These things rarely show up as huge blowout arguments right off the bat. Instead, they sneak in through comments that seem harmless, small provocations, or situations that are set up just to see how far a man is willing to go. The wild thing is, when you're living it, everything feels like it's just normal relationship stuff. And that's exactly where a lot of men miss the early signs. They don't catch the pattern that's already starting to form. Think about everyday situations. She suddenly takes hours to reply to a text when she used to answer right away. She drops the name of a coworker just to see how you'll react. She cancels plans at the last minute, or she throws out a criticism and then follows it up with, "I'm just joking." None of these things on their own mean something serious is going on. People have bad days, make mistakes, and sometimes act impulsively. The problem shows up when this kind of behavior stops being the exception and starts happening on repeat, creating this constant feeling that he has to keep proving himself all over again. That's where a lot of men fall into a quiet trap. Because they're wired to fix things, they tell themselves that if they just show more affection, more patience, more dedication, everything will go back to normal. They think they're making the relationship stronger, when really they might be teaching the other person that there will always be another chance to push his limits with zero consequences. And that one detail completely changes the dynamic. Because what looked like just a rough patch might actually be hiding a much deeper reason why these tests never seem to stop. Topic 2. Why he keeps putting up with it. What makes this story so common is that most of these men don't stick around because they enjoy suffering. They stay because they see potential where other people would only see red flags. When real feelings are involved, it's natural to believe that a little more patience, one more honest conversation, or one more extra effort could turn things around. They see the tests as temporary bumps in the road, not as signs of a pattern. And that difference in how they're reading the relationship completely changes the choices they end up making. There's this deeply ingrained idea, especially among men who take commitment seriously, that giving up too soon is a sign of immaturity. So when she starts an unnecessary argument or creates conflict out of thin air, he thinks, maybe she's just going through something tough right now. When she pulls away to see if he'll chase her, he figures that showing more dedication will make the relationship stronger. Without realizing it, every new attempt to fix things sends a silent message. No matter what happens, he's not going anywhere. And in a dynamic like this, that constant availability starts to become completely predictable. The problem is, love and tolerance aren't really the same thing. A healthy relationship grows when both people own their behavior, not when only one of them is carrying all the emotional weight. A lot of men figure this out way too late, after months or even years of trying to fix conflicts that were never really theirs to fix in the first place. And that's when a question starts creeping in. Quietly at first, then louder and louder. Is responding to every single test actually making this relationship stronger? Or is it just feeding a cycle that never ends? Topic 3. The mistake almost every man makes. Responding to every test. When these tests become a regular thing, the most common response from a man is to try to address each situation right away. If she seems distant, he asks what's wrong. If she takes a jab at him, he tries to explain himself. If she picks a fight over something small, he thinks a long, heartfelt conversation will be enough to smooth everything over. His intentions are good. He's trying to protect the relationship. But without realizing it, he gets pulled into a cycle where every conflict drains more emotional energy out of him than the one before. This is a pattern that people who study human behavior see all the time. Whatever gets a strong reaction tends to happen again. When every little provocation is met with an even bigger show of attention, care, or concern, the whole dynamic of the relationship can end up revolving around those reactions. This doesn't mean anyone is always doing it on purpose or running some kind of calculated playbook. A lot of times, both people fall into this cycle without even noticing. One is looking for security through the tests. The other is trying to restore the peace by responding to every new challenge. In the end, both of them are stuck in a game that neither one actually wanted to play. Over time, something interesting starts to happen. He begins to notice that no explanation ever seems to be enough. No act of commitment ever fully closes the book, and every problem that gets solved is quickly replaced by another one. Little by little, the question shifts. It stops being, how do I get her to trust me more? And becomes, why do I have to keep proving my worth every single day? And when that shift in perspective happens, the relationship enters a completely different phase, because the tests stop feeling like small hurdles and start revealing a much deeper problem. Topic 4. When the tests stop being curiosity and turn into disrespect, there's a massive difference between a relationship that goes through natural rough patches and one where a person feels like they have to prove their value every single day. When the tests stop being isolated incidents and start becoming part of the daily routine, something quietly changes. The man no longer feels like he's building a partnership. He starts to feel like he's stuck in a permanent performance review, like any small slip-up could be used to question his character, his commitment, or his worth as a partner. Slowly but surely, what once felt like emotional exhaustion starts eating away at the respect inside the relationship. This shift usually shows up in behaviors that, taken one at a time, seem minor. She makes comparisons to other men just to get a reaction out of him. She keeps questioning his intentions even after he's given her countless reasons to trust him. She threatens to end things during any argument that gets serious, or she turns ordinary disagreements into some kind of loyalty test. No relationship is perfect, and conflict is just part of being with someone. The problem kicks in when these situations stop serving the purpose of resolving differences and start creating a constant undercurrent of insecurity. Instead of peace, he starts living on edge, always bracing himself for the next blow-up. And that's exactly when a lot of men start noticing something they'd been overlooking all along. It's not the effort that's increasing, it's the exhaustion. They're still physically present, still holding up their responsibilities, still going through the motions of the relationship. But emotionally, something starts shutting down. The energy that used to go toward pursuing her, understanding her, and building something together is now being burned up just trying to survive the daily grind. And when this process hits a certain point, a transformation happens that the other person almost never sees coming, until it's already too late. Topic 5. The invisible moment when he changes on the inside. Most people think a relationship ends the day someone packs their bags and walks out the door. But in reality, that's usually just the final chapter of a story that had already been changing for a long time. Before there's any physical distance, there's an emotional distance that almost nobody can see. It doesn't happen overnight. It builds slowly, after countless conversations that went nowhere, promises that never turned into real change, and a kind of tiredness that gradually fills up the space where excitement used to live. The man is still showing up, but he no longer feels that same sense of hope he once had. This is a strange moment, because from the outside, it can actually look like things are getting better. He's not blowing up over every little thing anymore, he's not pushing to resolve every conflict, and he's stopped reacting to a lot of the things that used to really get to him. Someone watching from the outside might think he's finally learned to manage his emotions, or that the relationship has found its groove. But a lot of the time, the exact opposite is true. That silence isn't peace, it's surrender. Not because he's completely stopped caring, but because he's started to realize that love alone isn't enough to hold together a relationship where respect and stability have already slipped away. Maybe this is one of the hardest changes to pick up on. The man stops fighting to convince the other person that the relationship is worth investing in and starts investing in something he'd let go of a long time ago, his own peace of mind. He comes to understand that spending every day trying to dodge the next conflict isn't the same thing as actually living a healthy relationship. And once that realization truly sinks in, his behavior starts shifting in ways so subtle that almost no one notices. The most surprising part is that this quiet transformation sets the stage for something that tends to catch the other person completely off guard. If you're getting something out of this kind of insight, take a second to subscribe to the channel. Every week we break down the psychology behind relationships, emotional strength, and the patterns every man should recognize before they cost him his peace. Now let's look at what happens next, because this is where most people completely miss what's really going on. Topic 6. The silence she reads completely wrong. This is exactly the phase where one of the biggest misunderstandings in a lot of relationships happens. When he stops arguing, stops reacting to provocations, and suddenly seems a lot calmer than before, it can easily be read as a sign that things have finally gotten back on track. After all, the fighting has died down, conversations are shorter, and he's not pushing to make his point anymore. From the outside, it looks like he's grown up emotionally, but on the inside, the story can be completely different. In reality, a lot of men reach this kind of silence because they're emotionally drained. They stop pushing, not because they've found some perfect answer, but because they've realized that no answer is going to change the dynamic. It's like someone who keeps knocking on a door hoping it'll open, and after enough tries just stops knocking. It's not that the feelings are gone. It's that the hope of getting a different result is gone. And that silence, which some people mistake for acceptance or going with the flow, often represents an internal decision that's been quietly building for quite a while. This is why so many people describe this kind of breakup as coming out of nowhere. They only look at the last few days of the relationship and forget to pay attention to the whole process that led up to that point. While one person believed the lack of fighting meant things were stable, the other was using that same quiet period to get their emotional life back in order. No big announcements, no threats, no dramatic scenes. He just starts picturing what life would look like without that constant weight on his chest. And once that idea stops feeling scary and starts feeling like relief, the decision that follows is almost impossible to walk back. Trick 7. The day he just walks away. Then comes the day nobody saw coming. There's no big explosion, no marathon argument, no movie-worthy blow-up. Most of the time, the moment he actually leaves looks surprisingly low-key. He says very little, keeps his cool, and makes a decision that, to the other person, feels like it came out of nowhere. But the truth is, that decision had been in the making long before. Every conversation that ended without any real change, every boundary that got crossed and ignored, every failed attempt to just find some peace, each one quietly added a little more weight to the scale. And when that weight finally tips past the hope, leaving stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like the only thing that makes sense. The hardest part to wrap your head around is that men rarely reach this point overnight. A lot of them spend months trying to save the relationship before they can even admit to themselves that they can't do it alone. They put up with more than they'd ever want to say out loud, because they believe in commitment, because family matters to them, or simply because they don't want to give up on someone they once deeply loved. But everyone has a breaking point. And when a man realizes he's sacrificing his own peace of mind just to keep a relationship afloat that has nothing left to offer in return, he starts understanding that staying also has a cost. And sometimes that cost is just too high to keep ignoring. That's exactly why so many women describe this kind of ending as unexpected. They remember the guy who used to push, who used to chase, who always found a way to dig deep and try one more time. What they didn't notice was that guy changing, little by little, in silence, while he was still standing right next to them. By the time he finally decides to go, he's not running away from one specific argument. He's closing the book on an entire cycle of emotional wear and tear. And it's only after that door shuts that most people start looking back, finally trying to figure out where it all actually started to fall apart. Topic 8. Why she finally realizes what she lost. After he's gone, the silence takes on a whole different meaning. For a long time, the fact that he wasn't reacting felt like just another phase, something she could turn around whenever she felt like it. But once she realizes he genuinely has no intention of going back to the way things were, questions start flooding in. She replays old conversations, little arguments, moments that at the time seemed like no big deal. What used to look like a guaranteed display of patience now starts to look like something far more valuable than she gave it credit for, because we rarely feel the weight of an absence until something we assumed was permanent just isn't there anymore. This happens because the human mind tends to value what it loses more than what it has every single day. While he was still around, it was easy to assume there'd always be another conversation, another shot, or one more chance to push the limits. Once that certainty disappears, the whole story gets reread through a different lens. Things that once seemed totally normal start looking completely different in hindsight. Not because the past changed, but because the distance allows you to see details that used to stay buried under the routine and the assumption that he'd never actually leave. Of course, not every story ends the same way. Some people reflect, grow, and use the experience to build healthier relationships down the road. Others try to get back exactly what they let slip through their fingers, only to find out that some decisions can't be undone just because you're sorry. But the most important takeaway isn't whether or not she missed him afterward. The real question is a different one altogether. What can a man learn from this experience so he never has to reach the point of losing his own peace before making a decision that matters this much? Topic 9. The lesson every man needs to learn before it's too late. If there's one thing this story makes clear, it's that healthy relationships aren't built on constant tests. They're built on trust that develops over time. Every couple goes through conflict, insecurity, and moments of doubt. The difference is in how those moments are handled. When two people work together to work through their problems, the bond gets stronger. But when only one of them constantly has to prove their worth, the relationship stops being a partnership and starts becoming a slow, quiet drain. No amount of love can keep growing for long in an environment where respect has to be earned every single day. Maybe the biggest mistake a lot of men make is thinking that setting limits means loving someone less. It's actually the exact opposite. Healthy boundaries show that the relationship matters enough to protect. They keep small behaviors from snowballing into destructive patterns, and they make it clear that commitment doesn't mean tolerating anything and everything indefinitely. An emotionally mature man understands that patience is a strength, but he also knows that patience without reciprocity eventually turns into self-sacrifice. And when that happens, it's not just the relationship that starts to lose its footing. His sense of self-worth starts paying the price too. At the end of the day, real strength doesn't show up in the moment someone decides to walk out. It shows up long before that, in the courage to recognize the difference between fighting for a relationship that's worth it and staying stuck in a dynamic that's slowly destroying the peace of both people involved. It's a hard call, because feelings, memories, and hope are all wrapped up in it. But understanding that difference can save years of emotional wear and tear, and open the door to relationships built on respect, trust, and something actually mutual. Because when a man learns to protect his peace without losing his ability to love, he stops living like he's always one step away from failing a test, and starts building the kind of relationship where nobody feels the need to run one in the first place. Conclusion. If there's one lesson to take away from this story, it's this: never confuse endless patience with endless strength. A healthy relationship shouldn't require you to constantly prove your worth or sacrifice your peace just to keep it alive. The strongest men aren't the ones who silently endure everything that gets thrown at them. They're the ones who know when a relationship is helping them grow, and when it's slowly grinding them down. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever stayed in a relationship longer than you should have because you kept believing things would eventually turn around? Or do you think walking away should always be the very last resort? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your experience might be exactly what somebody else needs to hear today. If you got something out of this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Every week, we get into the psychology of relationships, masculine emotional strength, and the habits that help men build healthier, more fulfilling lives. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.